Welcome to the Pursuit Zone Adventure Travel Podcast. I am your host, Paul Schmid, and I interview modern-day explorers from around the globe to bring you their exciting stories. These are people that dream big, break out of their comfort zones, and accomplish ambitious pursuits. This is episode 150 with Seamus Crawford and Paddy Montgomery. This is the second appearance on the show for Paddy and Seamus, having just completed the final part of their multi-year, multi-sport adventure called Saddle, Sand, Sea. But before we get to that, if you want to give me some feedback, you can send me an email at paul@thepursuitzone.com or leave me a voice message at speakpipe.com/thepursuitzone. And now, let me introduce my guests. Seamus Crawford and Paddy Montgomery previously appeared in episode 118 to talk about the first two legs of their journey, the race across Europe and the Marathon des Sables. Now they are back to talk about their successful completion of Leg 3, the Talisker Whiskey Atlantic Challenge, a 3,000 nautical mile row across the Atlantic Ocean. They are fundraising for the Prostrate Project and Shooting Star Chase, and you can learn more about their adventure at saddlesandsea.com. Seamus and Paddy, welcome back to the show.
Thanks very much.
Can you tell us what is, or first of all, let me back up. Congratulations on this accomplishment.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. It's all quite surreal that it's actually finished and over now, and we're sort of talking about it in the past instead of the sort of upcoming event, which is quite nice.
Yeah, that's for sure. It's definitely as you say, it's very, very nice to be home finally and going to bed each night and kind of knowing that it's the grueling challenges are now done, for at least now anyway. Yeah, it's great to have them done.
What is the Talisker Whiskey Atlantic Challenge?
It's an ocean rowing race which takes place every year now. It's just over 3,000 miles. It starts in La Gomera, which is the Canary Islands just off Africa, and a load of crazy people get into very small boats and have a race to the other side of the Atlantic, and you finish off in English Harbour in Antigua.
How many teams compete?
It hugely varies year on year. So I think this year we had, correct me if I'm wrong, Paddy, I think it was 29 had originally.
Yeah, I think so.
29 boats had signed up for the race. And I think actually 28 started. Hopefully, if everyone finishes that's in the water now, it should be 26, I think, finish. I think 3 had to be rescued. Or maybe that's maths is terrible. 25 should finish and then 3 had to be rescued if 28 started. So it hugely varies. I think it's got a huge amount of popularity as the years have gone on and the race coverage has started to increase. There's a whole series of world records were broken this year, so that there's been a lot of press coverage. And I think from the sound of things, the actual race itself is already full for next year and potentially even the year after. So I think full in inverted commas is around 30 boats. I don't think they can necessarily take more than that. At this stage, they might start to increase that. But in years past, there used to be, there were kind of 10 boats starting, but it's hugely increased as the popularity has increased.
Guys, why do you think it's become so popular? What is it about rowing that makes people want to do it?
I don't know. I think people are maybe society, and this is going to sound much deeper than it probably is, but people are getting to a stage where they realise it's not all about work and sort of working every hour of the day and then getting home and sort of just sitting in front of the TV. It's doing a bit more, really. And because they've advertised it very well, and it's probably the craziest thing you can do, I think people get the bug of doing something and see something like that race and think, well, actually, if someone else has done it or someone I know has done it, why can't I do it? And I think it's partly just people, moods changing in terms of what they want to do with their lives, but also just because the race has got bigger, more people have heard about it. So more people have done it and hopefully made it slightly more quantifiable or sort of manageable in people's brains to think they can achieve it themselves.
I think nowadays that lots of people are starting to, with this kind of a new wave of people wanting to undertake things that are a bit outside their comfort zone, outside their day-to-day life. Lots of people are doing more and more crazy things. Every month, it seems like you kind of hear about these insane things that people are doing. And I think the rowing across the Atlantic is something that is still for, you could say a kind of a fairly exclusive club, as to be able to undertake a challenge like that, which so few people on the planet have done, it's actually still quite nowadays it's quite a rare thing. The amount of people that have gone up Everest, I think, Paddy, I don't know if you've got that figure or something, but the amount of people that try to attempt Everest every year is just insane now. Not to take away from the fact that it's an incredible achievement when people do it, but it's something that, lots and lots of people are doing. And I think to have that kind of unique aspect of a challenge like rowing across the Atlantic is something that's very attractive to a lot of people, although there are, a fair few barriers to entry, as you could say, about, getting to the start line of the challenge in terms of finances and organization and giving up commitments in life. But yeah, I think it's just that aspect of doing something crazy, but also something that is pretty unique.
What is the cost for entry?
So it depends how you do it. For the race, for the Talisker Whiskey Atlantic Challenge, it's around £20,000 for a pair to enter. And that's just sort of the entry fee. And then on top of that, you've got, depends how you do it, you've got the boat, all the various bits of kit, the safety equipment, and that can cost anywhere in the region of sort of £30,000 to £60,000. I mean, our boat costs £50,000, but that's been sort of partly funded through us, just through sort of savings and begging and borrowing and stealing from family, but also some great sponsors. The beauty of it is hopefully you can then sell it on to someone else who's doing it. So it is a very large number and sort of slightly scary, but hopefully at the end of it, it's more of a sort of cash flow thing than an actual cost, if that makes any sense.
How did your fundraising go in terms of, fundraising for the cost of the boat and so on and getting sponsors? Any tips you have for people?
Again, going sort of echoing what we said just previously now in terms of the popularity of people wanting to do crazy things and people doing crazier and crazier things on a kind of a seemingly month by month basis these days. It's there's almost a sense of, I think, saturation for a lot of potential sponsors of these types of events. So it was definitely a difficult challenge. And I think listen to one of the many desert island discs that we listened to, or one of the podcasts we listened to out in the middle of the sea was one of an interview with Ellen MacArthur when she was sailing around the world as part of the Bondi Globe, I think it was. And I think there was a statistic. She wrote well over 1,000 letters and only got replies to 2 of those letters, neither of which were offering any funds. So, and that was a long time ago. That was 10 years ago. And I think, so now it's just as, if not harder, to try and attract sponsors to these events because lots of people are starting to do them. I think a lot of it comes down to, unfortunately, luck. The vast majority of people who we'd spoken to beforehand, who'd done the race and who'd got some good sponsors, said it was really just through a friend of a friend who then introduced them to somebody else, who then, you would get a meeting with them, and then all of a sudden, having had months and months and months of no replies, within 5 minutes, they'd be like, yeah, we're keen to sponsor you. So, those sides of things definitely helped us. We were lucky on a couple of occasions, but one thing I think which did help us, I think if we'd maybe done it if we'd sort of gone down that route a little bit earlier, maybe sort of 6 months earlier, that might have helped just sort of give people more time to think about it. But we did a kind of a club type sponsorship role. So rather than people committing, large, tens of thousands to your campaign, they could commit a smaller amount, and that would put them into essentially a pot, almost like a raffle draw for the lead sponsor role. That was attractive to a few sponsors, and it meant that you kind of got the sponsors involved, and they were kind of happy to work with you for that slightly kind of lower price to start with, and it worked out great. I think everyone seemed to be happy at the end of it, but that was quite a good way of accumulating funds, because if you get, let's say, £5,000 or £2,500 as an entry into that kind of a structure, all of a sudden you get 10 people involved and you've got 25 grand or even 50 if you go up to 5,000 each. So, it's almost kind of strength by numbers in that sense, rather than getting the big ones, because the people parting with money is pretty rare these days. We had lots of good sponsors in terms of kit and products and food and, things like that massively help when you're trying to save costs as much as you can, because there's, I think we went, Paddy, again, correct me if I'm wrong, I think when the item set list that we had to go through, the checklist for our to be allowed to do the race, there's over 500 items on a checklist that you have to go through, and I'd say 90% of those things you have to buy as part of the race, more or less new. So and they all really add up. So getting any kit sponsored is always helpful.
What did you guys do to train for this event?
Any endurance event is a lot more mental than physical, I think. And having done the other two events, it gave us quite a bit of confidence that we knew we could just sort of plod on for quite a long period of time in moderate amounts of pain. If people are thinking about doing endurance events, I wouldn't underestimate the power of sort of, I don't know, just getting your head in the right space. But because we probably had a good year and a half in between the Marathon des Sables and the Talisker Whiskey Atlantic Challenge, we were able to get a really good sort of block of, or sort of number of blocks of training in. And we're very fortunate to sort of being put in touch with a guy called Gus Barton, who had done the race a few years ago and set the record at the time, who's a personal trainer. So he gave us a really good set of workouts to do and made it sort of manageable around work-life, admin for the road balance, really. So it was great to have someone providing training advice who'd sort of done it as well, just to sort of be able to provide a bit of insight as well of how it might help and where it might help in different parts of the race.
Again, fitting it around kind of jobs and stuff was probably one of the biggest challenges, because the amount of trying to fit the training in, and then all the admin that goes with taking part in the race. So that could be our own admin trying to sort stuff. We'd have a checklist that we'd talk through every 2 or 3 days and try and see where we were and all the different aspects of organisation. And then also, all the courses that we have to go to as part of being able to take part in the race. So you'd have to do navigation courses, safety courses, first aid courses, hours in the boat that are required both during the day and during the night. So you'd have to go out at weekends or take holiday to go and from work to go and get those hours done. And then trying to fit your just normal physical, going to the gym, training around our day-to-day jobs, which are kind of, I guess, relatively busy. It was just a question of trying to plan as best you could, for weeks at a time, just to try and make sure that you fit everything in, which definitely at times, certainly in my case, didn't work out, or I didn't plan well enough. And it came to a bit of just a bit of a mess, really. So and you learn from those experiences, and because, as Paddy said, we'd done these 2 challenges beforehand, and you learn how to cope with that sort of timetable better as you go through these things. And I think by the time we'd actually got to the beginning of the start line, hopefully both physically and kind of in terms of our organisation, I think we actually felt pretty well prepared relative to a lot of the other teams there. So that was a good thing.
I interviewed before another ocean rower, and he had mentioned that prior to starting that he got into this routine where he rubbed surgical spirits all over himself. Did you guys do that?
I did, on my hands and how shall I say it, posterior. But it's safe to say that it didn't have a huge amount of benefit. For some people, I think it's very dependent on your skin type. I think my bottom is like a baby's bottom, so it was quite, I don't know the right word, sort of temperamental to getting salt sores and stuff. But for some, I've spoken to a few other people who had done that, and it worked wonders. But unfortunately for me, it wasn't much fun.
To be honest, I think a huge element of it comes down to luck. I think on, as Paddy says, on skin type. We'd both done a lot of training out on the boat and sitting on rowing machines and stuff. So. And neither of us had a huge amount of issues. And I think Paddy unfortunately suffered quite bad in that area. I just very luckily didn't.
The last time we spoke in episode 118, you guys had yet to get a boat. I think there was a couple that you were looking at. So tell me about your boat, how you found it.
Yeah, so our boat is made by a company called Rannoch, and it's one of the sort of newer designs. There are sort of 2 ocean rowing boats you can get. Basically, there's a sort of the older pure class, where the easiest way to describe the bump or the sort of cabin where you sleep is at the back of the boat. And ours is the new sort of concept class, where the bump is at the front of the boat. And the way we found it was just sort of looking at other people who've done the race. And there are many more sort of crazy people around the world who row other oceans. So it was just trying to find a boat within the sort of specifications of what we need. And we were quite lucky. There were a couple of guys who live in London. The boat was based just outside in Kent, I think. So once we'd sort of managed to sort of earmark it a bit and got our finances in a slightly better state, we were actually able to move quite quickly, which was very useful. And it was a massive thing, I think, because it meant that we could get on the boat early. And as Seamus was saying, by the end of it, we felt pretty well prepared compared to other teams who didn't get their boat until mid-year, if not later. And we're still just sort of trying to figure out how to use it and how to move it about and where things go. Whereas we had it from the beginning of the year, we had a good sort of 10 months or so of playing around with it and just getting to know her. So, I mean, if people are listening and trying to get some advice, I'd try and get your boat as early as possible, because the more time you can spend on it, the better, basically. It's invaluable.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree with Paddy more there. It's just that whenever we were preparing, before we'd sort of bought the boat, every piece of advice we'd got from previous ocean rowers who'd had a successful kind of crossing and kind of campaign, every single one of them seemed to say, the more time you can spend in your boat, the better. For every hour you spend on that boat, it's worth 10 hours going to the gym. Because in reality, I think having done it now, having been out there for just under 40 days, sat in that boat, it's the gym work is important. But if you've spent months on that boat and you know the boat inside out and you're comfortable being on that boat and you know how to fix stuff, all the hours in the gym can't substitute that. That's the reason why there's a minimum amount of hours that the race organisers for the Talisker Whiskey Atlantic Challenge require you to do, but that is an absolute bare minimum of hours you need. The more hours you can get in that boat and out at sea, and as I say, just knowing her inside out, it's just totally crucial to getting across and having as comfortable and as enjoyable a trip as possible, I think.
So you get to the start, you get your boat there, you get to the start of the race. I guess I'm curious about, first of all, how far ahead do you get there before the start, and then what happens before the start of the race?
So we got there 2 weeks before the start, and I think the idea behind that is just the organisers, so they sort of meticulously check each boat, and just due to the numbers this year, that they sort of needed to get you out there so early just so they could get through everyone in time, basically. So for that 2 weeks, you're packing, repacking, unpacking, repacking, taking bits out, everything, and just making sure everything's in the right place and the boat's weighted in the right way. So if you sort of, heaven forbid, did capsize, it would rewrite, or it would just basically balance well. So for a good 2 weeks, we were doing that, and I think we got about, after our first week, the boat then got on the water, which was good news, and then it was just the final tweaking of random odd jobs here and there before we left. In hindsight, the race got delayed by 2 days just because the weather was pretty hectic. And I have to say that sort of did me the world of good. I think because we were out there for 2 weeks and it's such a small bubble, and we had sort of family coming in and out of it, because your head was still sort of, pressure was building and building. And for me, having those 2 days just sort of decompressed a little bit, which helped quite a lot. But yeah, it was a really weird environment, because you've got a load of people who've been organising or planning this thing for 2, 3, 4 years, and you're sort of a day or two away, having committed a huge amount of time and money to it. It's safe to say stress levels, however relaxed a person you are, were pretty high. So it was a beautiful place going to La Gomera, but I don't wish to ever go back there just because of the sort of slightly tainted memories.
It's a pretty amazing place to go, because you fly into Tenerife, you get a ferry across, which takes about an hour, and then you come into this little island, and it's a pretty beautiful port that sort of opens out into the mouth of the Atlantic Ocean, and you can kind of see the horizon from the cliffs and from the marina even as well. But it really sinks in then, I think, once you're stood in that marina, and maybe when you've got a bit of a better view up on the hill where we were staying, it really sinks in that there's a massive ocean that you're about to try and cross. And so there's definitely some nerves and like some stress as you get closer to the race, and trying to make sure that everything's organised properly, and that you kind of feel as ready and prepared as you possibly can be before you go. But I think although we had some sort of slightly stressful moments of getting stuff ready, I think it's a bit like an exam. You can't cram stuff. This isn't the kind of thing that you can cram for. I think you need to get out there and feel like you've done the preparation before you've got there, and that what you're doing there is basically just tweaking and topping things up, rather than kind of wholesale changes to the boat or buying completely brand new stuff, whatever it is. There's always going to be things that you've missed. This year they had the boats lined up in a boat park outside of the water, so it was great for us to kind of get to meet a lot of the crews and see all their boats. And it was a pretty cool atmosphere in the boat park. People were kind of working on their boats until kind of the late hours of night, and we'd be meeting for a couple of beers in the evening afterwards, and sort of chatting about how everyone's feeling and sort of what the preparation's been like. But it's a cool place to be, and it is. Although I wouldn't necessarily want to go back there because of the kind of the nerves and stuff and the memories you have beforehand. We've definitely got some good memories of it, and good memories now we're done, at least anyway. Lots of pre-race nerves, that's for sure. I think the one thing that I'll never forget is just the phrase that the guys that organised the race kept using. In particular, the safety officers, sort of the two main safety officers who both rode across the Atlantic before in teams. As we kind of got closer and closer to the start line, they kept using this phrase that it's going to be a fast and scary start. Those two words always kind of stuck in my head as thinking, these guys have rode across the Atlantic and they don't complain at all. They're these very, very much these types of characters that say, just get on with it and don't complain. But even if they're using these fast and scary start words, then it probably is going to be pretty fast and scary, which I think Paddy and I
certainly was.
Agree it certainly was. When we eventually got going.
How is it? What does it mean to be fast and scary?
Just to give you a bit of context, so the day we were supposed to leave, all the crews come in to meet in one kind of big meeting room, and they have a big map of the ocean and of, in particular, kind of focused in on La Gomera, where we were starting from. This little island, and there are several islands dotted around, and the map is of the ocean and the islands, but it is kind of focused on the wind direction and the wind speed. And so the day we were supposed to start, we were delayed by 2 days, mainly because the winds were just so strong from the northeast. So they were coming from the northeast and out towards the Atlantic, and they were kind of with gusts of up to 40 knots, which, if you've ever been in a little ocean rowing boat, is not fun to be in when it's that windy. They basically said, look, the winds are too strong, and because of that, the waves are way too big, and the swells are way too big for us to even let you get out of the marina into the mouth of the sea, because we'll just have to pick people up. People will capsize, and won't just have the horsepower to get away just using a set of oars. So when we eventually did start 2 days later, I think the winds had dropped with gusts of kind of 30 knots, which was still pretty strong, but the average wind speed had dropped a little bit down to kind of 20-ish. And we set off, and the kind of the fast and scary start element is basically with those types of winds, the swells really pick up. And I mean, there were stages, I think, for at least for the first 10 to 15 days, the waves were huge. And I think for stages of 72 hours at a time, there would be stages where the waves literally didn't drop below 40 to 50 feet, and that would be 24 hours a day, through the night, through the day, at nighttime. Especially once we'd kind of got going and we'd gone past the end of the month, it was pitch black in the middle of the night. So you've got these kind of enormous waves, which we'd never experienced before, because you just can't find waves like that when you're training in the North Sea. And it was just a complete baptism of fire. Having not experienced that, you just have to basically grin and bear it and just tough it out and try and keep as safe as you possibly can. And so that's the scary element. And the fast element is basically when you're going up and down these kind of 40 to 50 foot waves. When you're coming down them, you're going down very quickly, usually. So, on average, you could be going, if the sea was completely calm, and we were just using our kind of, if there was one of us rowing, you'd probably be going at 2 knots, let's say, on average. Whereas when you're coming down some of these waves, we were getting up to, at times when you actually caught the wave and you were surfing down it, you'd be surfing down at kind of 15 to 20 knots, so it would be pretty fast. And fast and scary was a very good way to describe it, I think, having looked back at it now.
What does that do to your stomach? I mean, did you guys suffer some sickness because of that?
I very fortunately didn't. Seamus probably had the most unenjoyable, first half of the race, but I think there were 72 hours where he was pretty much surviving off a diet of basically fresh air and vomit. I'm amazed how he got through it. It looked thoroughly unenjoyable, but I should probably let him describe it in some more enjoyable detail.
Yeah, well, it was just one of those things where I think, again, seasickness is one of those things that I think you either just suffer from or you don't. And I've always, unfortunately, been one of those. I was one of those kids that would go to the theme park with your family and friends, and I would go on one ride at the beginning of the day, and then I'd be green for the rest of the day, feeling a bit sick. So, and I'd imagine, given Paddy's iron stomach for the entire trip across, I'd imagine he was one of the cooler kids that was on the roller coasters all day, feeling absolutely fine. So, I unfortunately, I tried everything. We had these pretty hardcore patches that you can use. They're almost like nicotine patches called scopolamine. And you basically stick these little patches behind your ear. This stuff leaches into your system and is supposed to keep you feeling fine. And I tried these things out for several days before we even left, and then they just didn't work. For the first 3 days, it was just, I had my first meal, I got down, came back up within half an hour. And it was, to be honest, it actually wasn't as bad a 72 hours as I kind of remember it to be, mainly because I think neither of us were getting out that boat. We both had the mindset before we started that whatever happens, we're staying in the boat and we're getting across. And the amount of hours and preparation and months of kind of sacrifice that we put in and the charities we were raising funds for, it was going to be something pretty drastic that was going to stop us. So seasickness certainly wasn't going to be one of those reasons. So I kind of think I was almost over positive for those 3 days I was seasick and was kind of trying to laugh it off. And I kept rowing, which kind of took my mind off it at times. So a lot of the time I'd be feeling horrifically nauseous and would just pretty horribly just make myself sick, just stick my fingers down my throat and just make myself sick, just to try and let some of the nausea disappear for a little bit. Because you usually get about 20 minutes window after you'd been sick to kind of not feel too bad. So during that time, I'd be rowing just to try and take your mind off it and just being sick over the side of the boat while I was rowing. So luckily, I wasn't able to keep down any water or food until about day 3. And I remember I'd always be trying to eat something, however small it was, and trying to keep some fluid down. And it was on about day 3 that I managed to eat about half of one of these freeze-dried packs of food. And after about half an hour, nothing had come back up again. So it was just a bit of hope had come back, and then gradually I just started to come back to life and didn't feel too sick anymore. So very luckily, I just had 3 days of it. And it sounds like, having spoken to a lot of the other rowers, they experienced very similar things. So people were 3 to 5 days in pretty horrible conditions, and then they would have recovered. So it's just a question of having to trying to grin and bear it and try and stay hydrated and get any food you possibly can down you.
Guys, tell me a little bit about your routine day to day on the boat.
Yeah, so the routine is a pretty standard one across most teams, I think. And the idea is we would do, one person would be rowing at each time, and you'd do sessions of 2 hours sort of on rowing and then 2 hours sleeping, or sort of just sorting your life out. And the idea behind that, I believe, is because a sort of sleep cycle is 90 minutes, and it's good to basically not go over that, because once you go into sort of a slightly deeper sleep, it just makes you feel groggy and stuff. So that's the sort of idea behind it. But I mean, in reality, you probably never really get more than an hour sleep at any one time, because the first 15 minutes or so of coming off your session, you're sort of just talking to the other guy, getting in the cabin, drying yourself off and sorting out any sort of ailments you've got, making food, eating the food. For half an hour can sort of fly by easily. And then on the other end, you've got to sort of wake up, eat some more food, make sure you're ready for your 2 hour session on, put all your kit on and get ready. So yeah, 2 hours on, 2 hours off was the main thing. But I think in terms of sleep, on average, probably never got anything more than 4 to 5 hours, I think, probably a day, which isn't much fun, but it's amazing how quickly your body just learns to adapt and deal with it. Basically, it just means most of your ailments never really heal, but it's just something to deal with, I think.
I think both as well. We're kind of almost surprised by actually how quickly time does go. For example, in the morning, as the sun would come up, we'd have like a routine, and it just got to the stage of like even just a few days, neither of us would have to ask each other to remember certain things, because it would just be so ingrained in what you were doing. So, for example, at first light, we would always bring out what kind of almost looked like a toilet brush to clean off the solar panels, which helped charge our batteries. So you'd have to clean them off with fresh water, so that otherwise they'd be kind of salt encrusted and wouldn't be working as efficiently as they could be. There would be, changing. We had these little kind of portable chargers and portable solar panels, which helped us charge our kind of MP3 players and GoPros and things like that. There would be, you making the water for the day. So that we'd usually try and do that in the middle of the day when the sun was at zenith. So you can just get them, your batteries would be getting charged the most they possibly could be while using the water maker, which would be the biggest use of our batteries on a daily basis. And we would usually try and make about 20 litres at a time. The process of which would be filling a big jerry can of water from a pipe that comes out the side of the boat, because the waves were so big, there would be it would suck seawater up from the outside of the boat into the system. But because the waves were so big, there was a lot of the time air bubbles got into the system with the boat having been thrown around. And poor old Paddy, I couldn't do it to start with initially, and then probably wouldn't have been able to do it afterwards because of my seasickness. But Paddy would be sticking his head into the bowels of the boat to remedy these air bubbles in the system, and which was not easy. I can tell you, did it more or less every day, which was amazing. But that would take about 40 odd minutes, maybe, and then we'd get 20 odd litres of water. We'd use that water to obviously fill up our own drinking water, but that would then at the same time be some of the water we would use for our to fill up or to reconstitute our freeze-dried food. So Paddy would usually do that in a kind of mid-morning, and we would do as many food packets as we possibly could for the day. So we didn't have to keep going back in and out and sorting that out the whole time. So your food would pretty much be ready for you every time you came off the oars. Things like that. There's actually a lot to do on the boat, 24 hours a day, really, rather than just coming off and going straight to sleep. There was always maintenance of the boat, or, just trying to stay as healthy as you possibly could and fuel your body up for the 12 hours of rowing that we were doing each day.
So what food did you bring that you got sick of eating?
I don't think there's anything that really got sick of eating. I think we took a lot of pork scratchings, which in sort of moderate amounts are good, but when you sort of plow through, well, you get sort of super hungry, and when you plow through a whole packet in the space of a minute, that then decided to be not the most comfortable thing. But I don't think there was sort of one food that I sort of detested, really. We were quite good on advice of other people, just because all the food after a while it's much of a muchness, so we were advised to take a lot of sort of condiments, so sort of ketchup and hot sauce and stuff like that, so you were able to try and mix things up even if you didn't like them that much that day. So but broadly I could eat anything, so I was all right, I think. Again,
from advice we got from other people, we were quite good at sort of bringing a variety of different meals, this freeze-dried stuff, so we had pretty exotic stuff like beef stroganoff and chicken tikka and lots of sort of weird and wonderful foods that you wouldn't necessarily think would come in a freeze-dried packet. Variety was for us was definitely the key. Heard stories of people kind of bringing 40 days worth of chicken curry, which you might like chicken curry to start with, but I think after 40 days worth of it, you're going to get pretty sick of it. So I think it was just the key was having as much variety as possible. And again, to echo Paddy, I don't think we. Obviously, it was very, very nice. The one thing we missed, I think, rather than what we got sick of, the one thing we missed was kind of fresh food. So that whether that was when we arrived in Antigua, the one thing I was just wolfing for kind of a week afterwards, and still am to an extent, it was just kind of fresh fruit. That was just such a nice feeling to have some sort of cold, fresh fruit. It was amazing to have, having got back on land, because as you say, you don't really eat or drink anything cold. Everything is either warm or lukewarm the whole time, which you don't really care about because you're usually so hungry, and it's just fuel at the end of the day, and it's just a part of your admin of the day just to eat. It wasn't necessarily for pleasure, that's for sure. Although we did have a couple of chocolate pudding and toffee pudding desserts, which there was definitely some sort of pleasure in eating. But the rest of it was fairly just as part of our kind of daily routine rather than for enjoyment.
What were the most memorable moments out there for you guys?
For me, it was just the sort of small moments where you just sort of looked around and where you were, and you just sort of realized the ridiculousness of what you were doing, but how lucky you were also to be there. And that usually always sort of happened for me at sunrise and sunset, of just sort of sitting there and the amazing colors, and you can see forever, and the sun goes down, and then because there wasn't much moon as well at night, you could basically see every star in the sky. And it was, I don't know, I know exactly what Seamus was going to say, but I think for me it was just a number of smaller moments which would just add up, and then you sort of look back, you just realize how lucky you are and how fortunate you are to sort of have been in that position, really.
However miserable and tough the whole trip was at times, there would be kind of hours and hours, even days, where you just think, I can't handle this physical side of things anymore. I can't handle the lack of sleep or whatever it was. And then you'd have a 10-minute experience, and that would be better than what would have completely remedied your entire miserable moments for the whole trip. So, I mean, there's one, for example, it goes back to wildlife again. For me, it's basically in line with what Paddy's saying, because it just makes you realise that so few people will have seen these types of things that you're seeing on a kind of hourly basis out here. So we had an amazing moment just before sunset, about maybe 3 weeks in. I'd started my shift, and just off the back of the boat, I'd noticed a fin coming out of the water, and there was a reasonable swell, maybe kind of 10 foot or so. So we were kind of going quite quickly with it, with the waves, and a dolphin had appeared, and I thought, oh, amazing! I've never seen a dolphin out in the wild before. All of a sudden, they just started multiplying, and it was, definitely at one stage there were well over 100 dolphins all around the boat, jumping out, flipping around, just playing around the boat, swimming underneath it, swimming beside us, doing somersaults. And it was just one of those experiences where it's so difficult to convey and describe to somebody how amazing it was, because you're just sat there and this just sort of sensory overload. And it was amazing. And I think both of us will never forget that. So it was, things like that were amazing. But I think almost my favorite moment, which is probably a bit of a cliche to say for an ocean rower, was I think we would both happily go back 1,000 times to 3 hours to go of the race, when you kind of feel like you're almost, you're pretty much there. And it was just that anticipation of, we were rowing towards land. You can see land, you can smell land for the first time, and you're going to see your family and friends, who you've missed so much, and who you've put through such a horrible experience. Because you do realise that when you leave home, you realise that it's actually despite the fact that you're doing this to help raise money for charities, for these amazing charities that help lots of people that really suffer so greatly on a daily basis, you do realise that inherently it's quite a selfish thing you're doing. You're leaving your family and friends at home who have to endure all the news they hear, big horrible waves and dangerous experiences that they can't do anything about. So knowing you're seeing them is just such an amazing feeling. And the anticipation of that and coming around the corner into English Harbour in Antigua and seeing your family and friends and seeing kind of civilization again was just a magical experience that I don't think either of us will ever forget. And yeah, I mean, again, I would just echo saying what I said before. I'd go back and do that over 1,000 times. It was just an incredible experience, and it was so great speaking to a lot of the other rowers as well, because they just couldn't have felt the same more. It was just, everyone said it, just that feeling of coming into land, having been in the middle of nowhere for so long and not seeing any other humans or civilization. It was just an amazing thing to be part of.
Yeah, I know what you mean a little bit, although on a smaller scale. It's like when you run your first marathon and you realize when you hit like mile 24 and you're still going that you're going to make it, that excitement, that elation that you feel.
Absolutely.
It's amazing how quickly your body forgets all the pain of the sort of, previous 37 days, or in your marathon analogy, the previous 23. And then it's suddenly, oh, it's not too bad. And you started getting overexcited, which makes you sort of want to do all these crazy things again and again, which is great.
So describe for me, what is it like when what is the scene like at the finish line when you row in there to the harbor?
So you finished at a place called English Harbour, which was, I'm probably going to get told off by historians, but it was an old British fort or sort of naval base, basically, in the sort of 1800s. So it is a stunning place just in terms of the topography, but also just the sort of architecture of the old buildings. Because it's quite well sheltered, there's a whole load of super yachts. So it's just bizarre because first it's the sort of first bit of land you've seen for forever, which makes it bizarre. And then you've got all this amazing historical stuff, which you're rowing past, which just sort of baffles you. And then next to it's just this huge super yacht. So it's just a whole array of different sort of sights and sounds, basically. And then one thing that everyone said to us, which we weren't sort of really sure about, is the sort of smell of land. And you do get the sort of waft of land as you get in, which is another sort of really odd but amazing sensation. And then we got around the corner and you just hear this wall of noise from horns going off from super yachts, and you see your family. And it's much like a lot of the row. It's so hard to explain the feeling because it's just so unique. But it's safe to say it was a truly amazing thing. And as Seamus would say, I'd do it every day of the year if I could.
We keep saying it, but it is just so difficult to convey that feeling. And coming into that harbour was just magical. We saw Antigua, and land for the first time, which was just a glow on the horizon because we were rowing through the night. And then as we sort of started getting closer and we knew based on our kind of average speed, what the projected time was we were going to get into English Harbour, we knew that as we were going to get in, it was probably the sun was just going to be rising. So we had this amazing kind of experience of going through the night and then seeing individual lights on land at Antigua, and then finally getting to right close to the cliffs and being less than a mile away from the actual harbour we're going to be rowing into, and the sun starts to come up on a beautiful kind of blue sky day, and one of the boats comes out to greet you, which are the local safety guys, and they have press on board, and we get our flares out and they take photos, and we set off the flares, and it's just adrenaline is just pumping. Then you come around the corner into English Harbour, and there's a kind of an official finish line that you row across, and as you row across that, one of the safety officers is stood on the headland and lets off a big white flare. And as Paddy said, all this huge row of massive super yachts let off their horns. So again, just like adrenaline's pumping, and again, just amazingly, as we were coming in, the support boat that's kind of guiding you into the marina, in between us and the support boat, there were two dolphins just followed us in the whole way in, just popping out onto the surface. So it's just little things like that, which is just magical. And then obviously you basically go along the line of this long row of super yachts, and as you come to the last one, you come round the corner to the marina, which is just next to the kind of the boathouse, and that's where all your family and friends are. And it's just brilliant, because it's just a sort of a wave of emotion of knowing that you're about to step off and be able to hug your family and friends. It's just, you're never going to be able to describe that, as you can imagine, if you've been away from family and friends for a long time, and but also in this insane extreme scenario, it's just one of just sheer relief that you're there and you've done it, and it's over. What's fascinating is speaking to a lot of the other rowers that have done it, and essentially you've kind of all done, say 28 boats set off, and you've all pretty much you've had a relatively similar kind of physical experience, in the sense that you've gone from point A to point B. You've all followed a relatively similar route. Just that's the real simplicity of it. But in reality, that everyone's had such different experiences, and have such different feelings getting crossing the finish line. And some people will feel sad that journey's over, and some people will feel completely elated and wouldn't want to spend one more minute in their boat. So that's part of the magic of doing an event like this that so few people have done, I think, is that the feelings that you get from having done it are truly unique, I think, and are very hard to replicate in any other challenge. So it's, I mean, we could talk about this for days, and we'll probably bore you with it, but it just, that part of it is amazing.
Do you have any desire to do this again, either on another ocean with another team member or even solo?
Definitely not for me. I mean, you never know, but I think for me that was the sort of the pinnacle of the last 4 years of what we've sort of been trying to do, and I think there are other crazy things to potentially do out there, and hopefully I will put my ocean rowing career, retire from it, hopefully.
There's always going to be, given how ridiculously a high percentage of the world is covered by ocean, there's always going to be another ocean that you can try and get across in a rowing boat. And I think you could go on forever, and it is an incredible way to go across a big body of water. That's for sure. It's a completely unique way of doing it and way of experiencing being at sea. But I don't think I could put myself or my kind of family and friends through that again. I don't think. Some people really get the bug with it, and just and everything we've spoken about, that kind of sense of feeling very lucky that you're able to do a challenge like that and be out in the middle of the ocean and be in a part of the ocean that very few people may have been, and see things that people very rarely see. I think people get that bug and want it more and more. So there'll definitely be people from that fleet of people that finish the race and are going to finish the race who will want to do it again. But I'm not sure that either one of us is one of those people.
Do you plan on having a book come out of this, or a movie? Or I was wondering if you had any, did you have GoPros with you, or what? Any plans on that angle?
Yes, we had a whole load of go breaks and stuff and took daily diaries. I think each year the sort of organisers of the race sort of pitch the idea of doing documentaries and things to sort of TV and see if they pick up. Hopefully, due to this year's race being sort of so world record breaking and the number of people doing it, there's a chance of a documentary coming out and we might feature in that. But I think we're just sort of slowly going through the hours of footage now and just trying to figure out what we will do with it. But it's definitely nice, even just having it for our own sort of personal pleasure and sort of boring children and grandchildren and family and friends with it in the future.
I think as well that just on the writing side, I think I'm terrible at it, but I think it's going to be an important thing to do over the next kind of month or so is make sure that all the kind of experiences and memories we've got that we try and write down on a piece of paper somewhere, not on a computer or whatever it is. I think it's just the action of writing something down like that is pretty powerful and would be such a nice thing to have in years to come. And if that comes to like a slightly larger body of work, maybe a book I think is probably a bit too far. I'm not sure either of us are kind of potential authors, but I'm just speaking for myself there, Pads. You may be absolutely, but
definitely not. But
but it's I think it's definitely important. I think for both of us to write this stuff down because these experiences and kind of emotions are still relatively raw because we only finished just over 3 weeks ago. So it's good to write it all down because unfortunately these memories do fade and you want to have it all written down somewhere to be able to reflect on in times to come, I think.
How is the charity fundraising going? And if people want to contribute, if they still are able to, how do they do so?
Yes, that's been going really well. Actually amazed how the amount of generosity that's sort of still coming in, having sort of finished it already. But we're just at about £102,000, including gift aid, which is a sort of tax relief here, which is great. But the aim is to just sort of try and maximise that as much as possible. So reaching out to friends and local press and hopefully going to a few talks at schools and things like that is the aim for the next couple of months, just to ride off the back of the excitement of it. But if people want to donate, it's super easy. The best thing to do is probably go to our website, saddlesandsea.com, and at the top of the page there'll be a link to Virgin Money Giving, and that'll take you through to the sort of the right page where all the relevant information and how to donate and all that sort of stuff will be there.
It's been an incredible experience kind of over the last 3 years, not only from the challenges perspective, but getting to know our charities and the amazing work they do. And we held a big charity ball sort of back towards the middle of last year, which was just incredibly successful and was just a great evening to get all of our family and friends and just friends of friends together. And it was just a great event to celebrate the work of the charities and to raise as much money as possible for them. But again, it's just we're just so amazed by the generosity of people, and that definitely was an element that really kept us going when the times were pretty rubbish. And it sounds like a cliche to say, but when times were tough, you did start to think actually the tough times we're going through they're not even comparable to the sort of stuff that the people who benefit from our charities work are going through so every single day. So that definitely helped us, and I think we've hopefully conveyed that message to all of our family and friends of friends, which is why people have been so generous in sort of donating. So yeah, and as Paddy said, that donation process doesn't stop now. We're still open and very much open. We want to try and keep our campaign to raise as much money for these two charities going for as long as we possibly can.
Normally, I would ask you what's next, but I'm not going to ask that question since you just finished this big adventure. But I do want to ask a different question, and that is, how do you think this experience will change your future or will set you off on a different course, so to speak? Maybe not.
The main thing we've sort of realized and tried to sort of shout and tell as many other people as possible is if you just sign up to things, you basically find a way of doing it. So I think it's probably given me personally a bit of confidence in just backing yourself in terms of sort of tougher challenges. Because I mean, at the beginning of this, the thought of cycling across Europe, running across the Sahara and Rowan Ocean was utterly bonkers. And probably deep down, we sort of wondered whether we actually thought we could do it or not. But I think it's just throwing yourself out there and challenging yourself in life that these crazy things are possible. You just have to dive into it fully and back yourself, basically. So I think for me, it's the main thing of just having a bit more confidence in yourself and just realizing if other people can do these crazy things, why can't you?
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree more. And yeah, I think also just for us being out there and kind of having been away for a long time, I think it just helped for both of us to reaffirm, again, without sounding cliched and a bit cheesy, just the important things in life, and think about the things that occupied your mind when you were out there for such a long time. 99% of the time it was your family and loved ones and friends, and just trying to make sure that they're the most important things in your life going forward, and making sure that's never clouded, and making sure that everyone that is your family, friend and loved one sort of knows that, and yeah, it's just appreciating what you got, I think, and knowing that the silly stuff in life, like fundamentally that comes down to money, material stuff doesn't really matter. We don't really need much to survive and kind of get by in life, but just to appreciate that all the stuff you do have, and just enjoy life as much as you can while you're around.
Remind us again how we find you online.
Yeah, so our website is saddlesoundsea.com.
Any social media you want to mention?
Yeah, so all our social media has the handle sort of at SaddleSoundSea. So we've got a Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. But if you go to our website, there are links there as well for all the sort of relevant social media pages.
Okay, Seamus Crawford and Paddy Montgomery, congratulations once again on completing this great race, the Talisker Whiskey Atlantic Challenge. And thank you so much for coming on the show to tell the story.
Great. Thanks very much.
Thanks so much for having us.
Thank you for listening. If you want to support the show, you can subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts or iTunes, and you can like the show on Facebook or follow along on Twitter at The Pursuit Zone. This episode was recorded on February 9th, 2018. For the show notes and more great adventure travel podcasts, visit thepursuitzone.com.